Welcome to Carl's Garden. Today we're going to be answering questions submitted by our viewers. So, I'm Josh.
And I'm Carl,
I asked the questions.
and I answer the questions.
Alright, our first question comes from Nancy from Bowling Green, Kentucky. When is the best time to prune my shrubs?
In Arizona, Sunday at 4 a.m. to get out of the sun.
Well, she's from Bowling Green, Kentucky, so.
The thing to remember on pruning shrubs, being she didn't specify what kind they are, on flowering shrubs that bloom early spring, trim those after they bloom. If it's a summer flowering shrub, prune those after they bloom. What you want to do is do both of them before you get into the fall of the year, because that's when they start setting their bloom buds for the next year. So if you trim them late fall or even in the winter time, you're actually cutting the blooms off of most of them. So just kind of keep that in mind. The evergreens, um, needle leaf evergreens, we normally just trim those lightly, because if you go down to past like the current year's growth into 2-year-old growth, uh, they usually don't send out new buds to put new leaves out. So if you're going to trim them that heavy, it's better just take them out at the ground, get rid of them, and replace them with something else. We also have what we call broadleaf evergreens, which includes stuff like boxwoods, hollies, plants in that range. Pretty much you can trim those anytime they're growing. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Okay. Next question comes from Kathy from Scottsdale. We moved to Arizona 3 years ago from Chicago. We've had mixed results from growing vegetables in our small backyard garden plot. Any suggestions would be appreciated for our success. Thanks.
Okay, she didn't specify whether she was growing them in containers or raised beds or just a garden area by itself in ground. In any of those, the thing we have to watch in Arizona, even though we can grow 12 months out of the year, is our heat, the hot weather. So you coming from a colder climate where your seasons are kind of definite, even though they fluctuate some. Here we have to worry about the heat. So what you have to do is sometimes provide a little protection, shade on some of your vegetables. Always keep in mind that here we have to use what we call early producers. So like on a tomato, you want a tomato that's going to mature out in 64 days instead of 90 something days or maybe even 110 days. So you want those earlier producing crops, regardless whether it's tomatoes, peppers, your leafy greens or whatever. And even though we have several different plantings per year, you have to time it right to kind of skip some of that hot weather that we really have when it gets up to 110, maybe 115 degrees. So just keep that in mind. Shorter producing, maturing out varieties is better for this area.
Okay. Next question comes from Julie from Scottsdale. I saw online somewhere that if I put the cut end of a celery stalk or the end of a head of lettuce in some water on the windowsill and kept water in the dish, that a new plant would grow. Well, to my surprise, it worked. Now what? And Julie also sent us a picture that we'll show really quick too.
Okay. If you're wanting to plant the celery out, it does require sun. The lettuce does too. But what I would do is try to probably put it in a container. They love manure, any kind of cow manure, steer or horse or whatever kind of manure you can get. They love that. Put it in a container for the first 7 to 10 days. I would set it in what we call dappled sunlight, to where it gets a little bit of shade but some sun for about 10 days. Then adjust it to the full sun. And then the thing with celery, it's actually a long producing crop. So, 3 to 4 months is not unusual before you have to harvest that top. And to make the celery taste like you buy it at the store, it has to be blanched. So what you need to do is somehow 3 or 4 weeks before you harvest any of the stalks off the celery is you have to blanch that stalk. You don't want to cover the leaves themselves up, but you want to provide some protection around the stalks. Like some people use newspapers. You can use any kind of column type thing that you could set down over it that would let the tops come out the top, and you want to leave that on it for 3 to 4 weeks to blanch those stalks, and then when you harvest them, they'll taste like the celery out of the store. So that's what you need to do with it. And if you're going to keep it indoors, like in the water cup or whatever you've got it in, just change your water every 3 to 5 days, because you don't want that water to become stagnant, and just kind of pour it off and add fresh water to it. So you can keep it a pretty good while.
All right, got one more. This comes from Randy from Phoenix. Our front lawn has clover and weeds growing among the grass. My question is, do I need pre-emergence or post-emergence weed killer?
Okay, your pre-emergence, we're right in about the second week of March here in Arizona. The pre-emergence you need to put down in the fall of the year. That's when most of your weed seed is going to germinate. So that's when you put your pre-emergence down. And what that does, it kills any emergence weed seed that germinates, and kills it off that way. This time of year, the weeds have already sprouted. They're already growing. I've got clover in my yard that I need to get rid of. So you go with a post-emergence, which means after the seed germinates. So just kind of keep that in mind. And the timing on the pre-emergence is a little funny. So whatever the recommendations for this area on whatever pre-emergence herbicide that you have, just follow those directions and do it according to the directions, and you should be fine.
So is the pre-emergence like a weed killer just for weeds, or is it like a film that goes, because I always thought it was a film that went over the top of the yard to keep the weeds from penetrating through it?
It's a good question. It's a pre-emergence, and what it does, it inhibits uh, seed growth, seed from sprouting. So if you're going to overseed your lawn, and you can do it by the directions on the actual chemical container that you've got, just follow those directions. Usually you either seed first, let that germinate, then do your weed seed pre-emergence, or go ahead and do the pre-emergence, and then it'll tell you how many weeks you can wait to put your regular grass seed down, because you don't want to be inhibiting the grass seed growth too. So we usually do them separate.
So does watering or mowing affect it? Because I used pre-emerge one time and it rained like the next day or a couple days afterwards, and then the grass grew like crazy. I had to mow the yard, and then next thing I knew, I had weeds everywhere.
It was probably a timing. Uh, Probably your weed seed had already germinated when you put the chemical down, so it didn't really do anything to it, so it just kept growing. Once you had the water and the warmth on the grass itself, and everything just took off growing. So it's more or less a timing issue.
Okay. Did you have anything else to add before we go?
Just if you have a question about a plant, the pruning's kind of vague because there's so many different varieties of plants. When you're talking about trimming, pruning stuff back with different trees, the shrubs, the flowering plants, indoor plants. If you have a particular plant that you want to know when to trim it, how to take care of it. Just send us as much information as you can, a photo uh, of the plant, and then we can send it back to you by email, and we'll try to even answer your questions, in front of the camera. So just kind of keep that in mind, even on the grass and stuff. We'll probably do a lawn renovation here in the next several days, so we'll get that going and get that posted up for you too. So if you have any questions, just send it to the
Yeah, you can send those to Facebook or YouTube or our website, which is carlsgarden.tv, and we'll put all the links to the YouTube page and the Facebook page and all that stuff in the description below. So we hope we answered the questions. Um, hope we gave you the answer that you were looking for. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
and happy gardening. Thank you.